Hey there. This is one of the more fun episodes I made. I just want to get deep into what exactly itch is. When I'm talking to people, um, my product could get pretty confusing. I got the Healing Legends here, and then Water's Mist. And what's itch? Water's Mist goes for psoriasis, eczema, cellulitis, that kind of thing. But then Soothing Juggernaut is better for athlete's foot and fungal itch, like fungal acne around your hairline. So I just wanted to take a deep dive into getting into all the functions, all the symptoms, like uh, skin inflammation, psoriasis, topical dermatitis, um, histamine. Um, just go through everything. It's about 35, just over 30 minutes long, so it is a little bit longer, but it's well worth a listen to. And yeah, it'll give you a really good understanding of what itch is. I ended on tying in can have today products into the topical dermatitis, eczema, and then the athlete's foot. So it's a very interesting one, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. Take care.
Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. You know, when you're working hard, the last thing you need is that nagging itch slowing you down, especially if you're on your feet all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. So
It
today,
can really throw a wrench in your whole day.
it really can. So today, we're tackling itch relief head on, especially for all you hardworking folks out there. And we've got some great sources lined up from scientific journals to the latest medical research to really break down those itchy mysteries.
Yeah, it's amazing how something as common as an itch can have such a huge impact, especially when you're trying to get work done.
Exactly. It's not just an annoyance. It can really mess with your focus, your productivity, just your overall well-being.
Yeah, you can't concentrate.
Right. So first things first, let's just decode the itch itself. What exactly are we dealing with here when we talk about itch?
Well, medically speaking, we're talking about pruritus. That's the fancy term for it.
Oh, okay, I've heard that before. Yeah, and it's not just a simple sensation, right? It's this complex interplay between your skin, your nerves, and your immune system.
Okay, so it's a whole system, not just a surface level thing.
Yeah, it's a whole system. It's not just, something that happens on the surface. There's a lot going on under the hood.
Now, I know we hear a lot about histamine being a major culprit behind itch. What's the deal with that?
Well, histamine is like a little alarm bell in your body.
Okay.
It's a chemical messenger that gets released when you have inflammation or an allergic reaction. So think of it as your body's way of saying, hey, something's not right here.
So it's basically like an SOS signal from your body.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little red flag going up.
Now, here's the thing. I've tried antihistamines, for like dry skin itch, and they don't always work. Why is that?
That's a great point, and it highlights a key fact. Not all itch is created equal.
Right.
So dry skin itch, for instance, is often not directly related to histamine. It's more about your skin barrier being disrupted, like a crack in your armor, so to speak.
Ah, so it's like two different languages of itch almost.
Yeah, exactly. There are different mechanisms at play.
Now, let's talk about a specific type of itch that's all too familiar, especially for those of you on your feet all day, athlete's foot.
Right. Athlete's foot, or tinea pedis, if we're being all medical about it.
There we go. Gotta love the Latin.
It's a fungal infection, so it's a completely different beast from general skin itch pruritus.
Okay, so that itchy feeling between your toes, that's a whole different ballgame.
Completely different ballgame. You need to target that fungus specifically.
You need the right tool for the job, right?
Exactly. Using the wrong treatment for the wrong type of itch is like using a hammer to fix a leaky faucet. It's just not going to work.
You're just going to make things worse.
Exactly.
So knowing your enemy is half the battle. Speaking of battling itch, let's dive into a couple of potential warriors in this fight. Soothing Juggernaut and Water's Mist. We've heard that Soothing Juggernaut is specifically formulated to target that pesky athlete's foot itch.
That's right. And the reason it's so effective is because it's designed to go after the root cause, that underlying fungal infection, not just mask the symptoms.
Okay, so no more Band-Aid solutions. This is about taking out the root of the problem.
Exactly. It's like a targeted strike force going right for the source.
Love that analogy. Now, on the flip side, we have Water's Mist, which is more about soothing eczema itch.
Exactly. Eczema is another common issue, and it often comes with dry, inflamed skin. Water's mist is like a gentle firefighter coming in to calm things down and restore balance. Now, I know you're interested in how all of this relates to hardworking folks, especially those in blue-collar jobs.
Absolutely. Our listeners are out there, putting in the hours, often in demanding environments. Their skin goes through a lot.
Exactly. And certain work environments can actually make you more prone to itch, for example, if you're working with chemicals or detergents, or you're constantly exposed to dust and debris. Those irritants can really disrupt your skin barrier.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like your skin is under constant attack.
It is. And then you factor in physical strain, sweat, and maybe even friction from clothing or equipment.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder itch can become a real problem.
So for our listeners who are dealing with those work-related itch woes, let's take a step back and really understand how that itch sensation plays out in our bodies.
All right, so imagine your skin as like this frontline defense barrier, right?
Okay.
When that barrier gets compromised, like with dry skin, it can trigger inflammation and make your nerves super sensitive. It's like setting off a chain reaction of discomfort.
So it's like your nerves are on high alert, sending out those itch signals like crazy.
Precisely. And if you have a skin condition like atopic dermatitis or psoriasis, those conditions often involve dry skin, plus this whole wave of inflammation, which just amplifies that itchy feeling.
Okay, starting to see the bigger picture here. So how do different ingredients in topical products actually impact that whole itch response?
Well, some ingredients work like peace negotiators.
Yeah.
They have anti-inflammatory properties that calm down that overactive immune response, which in turn reduces the itch.
So it's like hitting the pause button on that inflammatory cascade.
Exactly. Then you have ingredients that are like master builders, focusing on repairing your skin barrier. They help to restore that natural shield, preventing further irritation and that nagging itch.
So it's a two-pronged approach. Calm the storm and rebuild the defenses.
Precisely. And then there are ingredients that act like nerve whisperers, targeting specific nerve pathways involved in transmitting those itch signals.
So they're basically telling those overactive nerves to chill out, stop sending those frantic itch messages.
Exactly. It's all about interrupting that cycle of discomfort.
Okay, I'm starting to get a much clearer picture of how all this works.
Research is really exciting because it points to new possibilities for developing targeted itch relief solutions that work on a deeper level.
So it's not just about masking the symptoms, it's about addressing the root cause of the discomfort.
Precisely. And this is particularly relevant for those in physically demanding jobs where itch can really impact their ability to work effectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with constant discomfort, it's hard to focus on anything else. Now, you mentioned plant-derived compounds. Are there any specific examples you can share? I know a lot of our listeners are interested in natural approaches to itch relief.
There are. One example is a compound called alpha-bisabolol, which is found in chamomile. Studies have shown that alpha-bisabolol can actually inhibit certain nerve pathways involved in transmitting itch signals.
So it's like chamomile is a natural nerve soother.
Exactly. And another interesting example is a compound called linalool, which is found in lavender. Linalool has been shown to have calming and anti-inflammatory effects, which can be really beneficial for itchy skin.
So lavender is like a double whammy. It calms the skin and calms the mind.
Precisely. And these are just a couple of examples. The world of plant-derived compounds is vast, and there's a lot of ongoing research exploring their potential for itch relief.
That's really encouraging. Seems like nature holds a lot of answers when it comes to finding relief.
It does, and the more we learn about these natural compounds, the better equipped we'll be to develop safe and effective solutions for itch, especially for those whose work puts extra stress on their skin.
That's fantastic. Okay, here's a question that's always bugged me. Why does scratching feel so good? Even though we know it makes the itch worse.
Seems counterintuitive, right?
Totally.
Well, scratching gives you that temporary relief because it actually activates your pain pathways. Those kind of override the itch sensation. But here's the thing. Scratching also triggers inflammation.
Oh, right.
And it actually changes how your nervous system processes itch signals.
So you're making yourself more sensitive.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle.
Scratch to relieve it, but you're just digging a deeper hole.
Exactly.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
You get that itch, you scratch it, but it just won't stop.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's usually because of something called peripheral sensitization.
Okay.
And basically what happens is the nerves in your skin, they become more sensitive over time. And so even like the lightest touch can just feel super itchy.
Okay, so it's like your skin's alarm system is just stuck on.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's on high alert all the time.
Gotcha. So I was reading about this study where they used this chemical MC903 on mice.
Yeah.
And it actually caused the mice to develop something similar to atopic dermatitis, which is a really common skin condition that can be super itchy.
Right. Yeah, and MC903 is often used in research to create a model of chronic itch.
Okay.
And this study is interesting because it found a link between, like, skin lesions, like cuts and scrapes that you might get, working,
Yeah.
and increased signaling in the nerves that transmit sensations from the face.
Huh.
So even minor injuries can lead to chronic itch.
Wow. That's wild. And then I read about this other study where researchers actually watched skin cells react in real time.
How did they do that?
So they used something called live cell calcium imaging,
Okay.
and they exposed these cells to this inflammatory molecule called IL-20,
Right.
and they saw this rapid spike in calcium levels in like a portion of the cells. Yeah. So I guess that calcium spike is like a signal flare,
Yeah.
saying that those cells are super sensitive to IL-20, which is a key player in inflammation.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
The research also showed that IL-20 triggers the release of a bunch of other inflammatory mediators.
Oh, boy.
It's like chemical messengers that amplify the inflammatory response.
Okay, so it's like this one signal just leads to this cascade of reactions.
Yeah.
Making the itch even worse.
Exactly.
But it's not just about the skin itself, is it?
No, it's not.
Like our brains and our spinal cords can get involved too.
Absolutely. So chronic inflammation can trigger changes in the way your spinal cord processes itch signals, and that's called central sensitization. So basically, the itch signals get stuck on a loop in your spinal cord,
God.
even if the original problem in your skin is gone.
So it's not just in our heads, it's like literally wired into our nervous system.
Exactly. And the research mentions these glial cells.
What are those?
They're like the support staff of your nervous system.
Okay.
Usually they help things run smoothly, but when there's prolonged inflammation, they can release their own inflammatory mediators,
Oh, no.
which makes the itch even worse.
So they're adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
So we've got these signals from the skin, and then they get amplified in the spinal cord.
Right.
No wonder chronic itch is so hard to deal with.
It's a complicated process for sure.
And for those of you listening who work in blue-collar jobs,
Yeah.
where, cuts and scrapes and exposure to irritants are common, this whole process can be even more of an issue.
For sure. For those of you working with your hands every day, the risk of those injuries and irritation is higher, which just makes you more susceptible to these inflammatory pathways.
Yeah, it's not just the initial injury that we need to be mindful of. Certain things can actually make an existing itch even worse, like heat, cold, even stress.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's because of those TRP channels, right? Like
Yes,
little
yeah.
sensors on your nerves are just reacting to all sorts of stuff. We talked about TRPA1 being triggered by cold and cinnamaldehyde.
Right.
I want to hear more about the skin barrier itself.
Okay.
I know we touched on it briefly earlier.
Yeah.
But I think it deserves a bit more attention, especially for those in blue-collar jobs, where skin is constantly exposed to the elements and potential irritants.
You're absolutely right. The skin barrier is our first line of defense, and it's something we often take for granted.
Yeah, until it's compromised.
Exactly.
And I know when the skin barrier is weakened,
Yeah.
it can make you more susceptible to all sorts of problems like irritants, allergens, even infections, all of which can trigger inflammation and that dreaded itch.
Exactly. The skin barrier is a complex structure with several layers.
Okay,
The outermost layer, the stratum corneum, is like a suit of armor.
gotcha.
It's made up of dead skin cells and lipids
Okay.
that act as a protective shield, keeping moisture in and harmful substances out.
So it's like our body's own personal bodyguard.
Exactly. And when it's working properly, it does an amazing job. But
Right.
when that barrier is disrupted, things can go wrong.
Dryness, cracking, inflammation.
Yeah.
And of course, that itch we keep talking about.
Exactly. And, especially for folks in blue-collar jobs, there are a lot of things that can really wear down that skin barrier, like frequent hand washing, exposure to harsh chemicals, solvents, even just the wear and tear of manual labor.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that, the dry, cracked hands after a long day of work.
Ugh. Yeah.
It's not just uncomfortable. It's like it makes your skin more sensitive to everything.
It does, because a compromised skin barrier makes you more vulnerable to developing chronic skin conditions,
Okay.
like atopic dermatitis or contact dermatitis.
Right.
Both of those are known for inflammation and intense itching.
So it's like a vicious cycle.
We did.
You get a little irritation, it weakens your skin barrier, and then you're more likely to get even more irritated.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. That's why protecting your skin barrier is so important, especially when there's prolonged inflammation in the skin. It can activate these glial cells in the spinal cord.
Okay.
And then they start releasing a bunch of inflammatory mediators.
Oh, cool.
And that amplifies the itch signal.
So it's like they're making the itch even worse.
Mm-hmm. They're adding fuel to the fire.
And you said this can happen even when the initial inflammation in the skin is gone.
Yeah, once central sensitization takes hold, you can experience chronic itch even if the original trigger is gone.
So like the itch signal has become ingrained in the spinal cord.
It's kind of like that, yeah.
This really highlights why early intervention is so important.
It is.
The longer that inflammation goes on, the greater the chance of developing this central sensitization.
Exactly. And for people who work in blue-collar jobs where cuts and scrapes and other skin irritations are common, taking steps to prevent those injuries from turning into chronic problems is so important.
Okay, so what can people do?
Well,
We talked about treatments that target TRP channels, but are there treatments that can specifically target the central nervous system?
yeah, that's a good question, and that's an area of active research.
Okay.
Some scientists are looking into drugs that can modulate glial cell activity
Mm.
or block the release of inflammatory mediators in the spinal cord.
So like hitting the reset button on those overactive signals.
Yeah, you could think about it like that.
Interesting.
And there's also growing interest in non-pharmacological approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness techniques, acupuncture.
Okay.
All of those have shown some promise in managing chronic pain and itch.
So it's not just about finding the right medication.
Right.
It's about taking a holistic approach that considers both the physical and the psychological aspects of chronic itch.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
Finding the right treatment often involves a combination of strategies.
That makes sense. We've been talking a lot about nerves and the nervous system,
We have.
but I'm curious about the role of mast cells.
Okay.
I know they're involved in allergic reactions,
Yeah.
but how do they contribute to inflammation and itch in the context of those chronic skin conditions we've been discussing?
Right. So mast cells are immune cells found all over the body,
Okay.
especially in tissues that are exposed to the outside world, like our skin.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the first responders of the immune system, protecting us from things like pathogens and bacteria.
Gotcha.
But they can also contribute to inflammation and itch.
Okay, so how do they do that?
Well, one way is by releasing histamine.
Oh, like the thing that
It's
causes allergies.
Exactly. Histamine is well known for its role in allergies.
Okay.
It causes that itchy feeling and those hives and swelling.
So like when you get stung by a bee and the area swells up.
Exactly. But mast cells can release a whole bunch of other inflammatory mediators too.
Like what?
Proteases, like tryptase and chymase, cytokines, leukotrienes.
Okay.
All of those things can contribute to a variety of inflammatory responses,
Interesting.
like vasodilation.
What's that?
That's when your blood vessels widen.
Okay.
Increased vascular permeability and the recruitment of other immune cells to the site of inflammation.
So it's like those mast cells set off a chain reaction and itch is just one of the many results.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it.
And in chronic skin conditions like atopic dermatitis, you often see increased numbers of mast cells in the affected areas.
Right.
So are there treatments that specifically target mast cells?
Yeah, there are antihistamines,
Okay.
which block the action of histamine, are commonly used to treat itch,
Okay.
but they don't address those other inflammatory mediators released by mast cells.
So it's like you're only treating one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. So researchers are also looking into other approaches like mast cell stabilizers.
What do those do?
They prevent the release of inflammatory mediators in the first place.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned histamine earlier as one of the key players in the itch game.
Yeah.
Can we dive a bit deeper into that? I think a lot of folks are familiar with the term, but might not fully understand what histamine actually does.
Absolutely. Histamine is like this tiny but powerful chemical messenger that's involved in a whole range of bodily functions, including your immune response, digestion, and even your sleep-wake cycle.
Wow. So it's a real multitasker.
It is. But when it comes to itch, histamine's role is all about sounding the alarm. When your body encounters something it perceives as a threat, like an allergen or an irritant, it triggers the release of histamine.
So it's like sending up a signal flare to alert the troops.
Exactly. And those troops are your immune cells, which rush to the scene to fight off the perceived invader. This inflammatory response, while essential for protecting your body, can also lead to those classic symptoms of an allergic reaction, redness, swelling, and, of course, itch.
So histamine is the trigger that sets off that whole cascade of events, and that's why antihistamines are often used to block those effects.
Precisely. Antihistamines work by blocking histamine from binding to its receptors in your cells, essentially preventing it from triggering that inflammatory response.
So it's like putting a muzzle on that alarm system, preventing it from sounding the alarm in the first place.
Exactly. But remember, as we discussed earlier, not all itch is histamine related. So if you're dealing with dry skin itch, for instance, antihistamines might not be the answer.
Right, because in those cases, it's more about repairing that damaged skin barrier.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand the different types of itch and the various factors that can contribute to it.
It's about listening to your body, identifying the root cause, and choosing the right solution for your specific needs.
Absolutely.
Fun fact, did you know that Water's Mist was the very first product that I developed, and it was for my cellulitis itch? Now you know.
So before the break, we were talking about dry skin and how it can be a real pain, literally, especially for those of you out there working in tough conditions.
Yeah, and in some cases, that dry skin can actually be a sign of a more serious underlying skin condition called atopic dermatitis. You might know it as eczema.
Atopic dermatitis, I've definitely heard of that, but to be honest, I don't really know what it is. Can you fill us in?
Sure. So atopic dermatitis is this chronic inflammatory skin disease. It often starts in childhood, but it can actually pop up at any age. And it's characterized by, you guessed it, dry, itchy skin.
Yeah.
And in more severe cases, you might see red patches, bumps, or even like oozing sores.
Oh, that sounds pretty miserable. Is it related to allergies at all?
Yes, it's considered to be part of what we call the allergic disease spectrum.
Okay.
It often shows up alongside other allergic conditions like hay fever or asthma.
So if you're prone to allergies in general, you might be more likely to develop atopic dermatitis.
That's the general idea. And like a lot of allergies, it's thought to be caused by kind of this combination of genetic and environmental factors.
Right.
Essentially, the immune system kind of overreacts to certain triggers, leading to inflammation in the skin.
And I'm guessing histamine plays a big role in this whole allergic cascade.
You bet. Remember those mast cells we were talking about?
Yeah.
They're really key players in this whole process. When someone with atopic dermatitis encounters a trigger, things like pollen, dust mites, certain fabrics, even stress, those mast cells release a flood of histamine.
And that histamine basically sets off all the alarm bells, causing all those unpleasant symptoms.
Exactly. The histamine, it binds to those H1 receptors, and that leads to, blood vessels dilating, fluid leaking into the skin, and of course, that intense itching sensation.
So it's kind of like what happens with a mosquito bite, but on a much larger scale.
That's a good way to think about it. With atopic dermatitis, it's this more widespread and persistent inflammatory response. And, as we discussed earlier, that whole itch-scratch cycle can actually damage the skin barrier even further, making the condition worse.
So we've got this chronic inflammatory condition, atopic dermatitis, that's really driven by histamine. What can people do to manage this? I mean, you can't exactly avoid every single trigger out there, right?
That's true. Complete avoidance is often impossible. But there are definitely ways to manage atopic dermatitis and minimize those histamine-driven symptoms. First and foremost, moisturizing is crucial.
So we're back to the importance of keeping that skin barrier strong and hydrated.
Absolutely. Keeping that skin barrier intact helps to prevent those allergens from getting through and triggering those mast cells in the first place.
Right.
And in addition to moisturizing, identifying and avoiding specific allergens that kind of make your atopic dermatitis flare up can also make a big difference.
So it's like detective work. You got to figure out what your own personal triggers are and try to minimize your exposure.
Exactly. And beyond those kind of moisturizers and allergen avoidance, there are also medications that can help control the inflammation and that itch.
Now you're talking. Tell us more about those medications.
So for atopic dermatitis, the first line of defense is usually topical corticosteroids. These are medications that help to reduce that inflammation and kind of calm down that overactive immune response in the skin. And of course, we can't forget about antihistamines.
Ah, yes, the classic allergy medication.
Right. Antihistamines, they work by blocking the effects of histamine.
Okay.
They essentially bind to those H1 receptors, preventing the histamine from setting off that inflammatory cascade.
So they're like tiny little shields protecting those receptors from the histamine attack.
That's a great way to put it. And it's important to know that there are two main types of antihistamines.
Okay.
First generation and second generation. First generation antihistamines are older, and they tend to make you drowsy.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. It's like a one-way ticket to Sleepy Town.
Exactly. While that drowsiness can be kind of helpful for nighttime itch relief, it's not ideal if you need to stay alert during the day. That's where those second-generation antihistamines come in. These newer ones are much less likely to make you drowsy.
So you can get that itch relief without getting knocked out.
Exactly, it's a win-win. And in addition to those oral antihistamines, there are also topical antihistamine creams that you can apply directly to those itchy areas.
So if you got a really itchy spot, you can just kind of zap it with some antihistamine cream.
Pretty much. But it's important to remember that while those antihistamines can provide relief from the itch, they don't actually address the underlying inflammation that's driving the atopic dermatitis.
So it's more like a temporary fix, not a long-term solution.
Exactly. For that long-term control, it's really important to manage that inflammation, usually with those topical corticosteroids or other medications as recommended by your doctor.
Right. You got to kind of tackle the root of the problem, not just mask the symptoms.
Right. And it's not just atopic dermatitis where histamine plays a role.
Right.
There are other allergic conditions too, like allergic rhinitis, better known as hay fever.
Oh, yeah, hay fever, that's another one that can really make you miserable.
Yeah, so when someone with hay fever inhales pollen, their immune system goes into overdrive, releasing, you guessed it, histamine.
So it's the same histamine culprit, just causing trouble in a different location.
You bet. In this case, the histamine causes that inflammation and irritation in the nasal passages, leading to symptoms like sneezing, runny nose, congestion, itchy eyes.
It's like atopic dermatitis, but for your nose.
That's a really good analogy. And the treatment approach is really similar too, with allergen avoidance, nasal corticosteroids to reduce the inflammation, and those antihistamines to block those histamine effects.
So if you're battling hay fever, you might actually reach for the same antihistamines that you'd use for atopic dermatitis.
It's possible,
Hmm?
but it's always best to consult with your doctor or allergist to determine the best treatment for you. So remember how we talked about histamine binding to those nerve endings, like a key fitting into a lock? Well, the ingredients in Kanaf today basically block those locks. They bind to the receptors themselves, so the histamine can't attach and set off that itch signal. It's like putting up a shield around those nerves, so they're less sensitive to the histamine.
So it's not about stopping your body from producing histamine. It's about making those nerves less reactive to it.
Exactly.
That's pretty neat. But what about the dry skin side of things? How does Ganab today help with that?
Well, it also has ingredients that mimic the stuff that makes up your skin's natural barrier. Think of it like patching up the holes in that protective layer, helping to seal in moisture and keep the bad stuff out.
So it's a two-pronged approach. Calm down those histamine-triggered nerves and strengthen your skin's defenses against the elements. That sounds like a win-win, especially for anyone dealing with work-related itch.
Exactly. It's about providing both immediate relief and long-term protection. Now let's circle back to those two products we mentioned earlier, Soothing Juggernaut and Water's Mist. Remember, Soothing Juggernaut is specifically designed for athlete's foot.
Right, that pesky fungal infection. What makes Soothing Juggernaut so effective against that?
So Soothing Juggernaut is designed for inflammation, muscle soreness, and fungal infections.
Oh, wow. So it's like a triple threat.
Like a 3-in-1.
Yeah, for the working person out there.
Absolutely, for all those like work-related problems you might have with your skin.
Exactly. And I'm seeing here some of the ingredients. Frankincense, cypress, and arnica oils. Are those the big hitters in this one?
Yeah, those are the key players.
Yeah.
So frankincense, you might think of incense, but actually what frankincense does in this salve is it helps with penetration of the other oils.
Okay.
So that's
Oh.
really cool. Cypress oil is a really good antifungal. And so it helps to kill those common fungi that you would find.
So that would be good for athlete's foot then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'd be perfect for that. And then arnica oil is really good for inflammation and pain.
So again, like hitting it on those different
Multiple levels.
levels. Okay, so it's like a tag team. Each one of them's playing their part.
Yeah, they work together.
Okay, so what about Water's Mist now? Where does that one fit in?
Water's Mist is more for hydration and itch relief.
Okay,
So that's going to be more your eczema go-to.
gotcha.
But it also does have antibacterial and antifungal properties in it as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a mist that will soothe and protect your skin.
So it sounds like Soothing Juggernaut is going for that like knockout push.
Yes.
Like we're going to go in there, we're going to fight.
Exactly.
And then Water's Mist is more like, okay, let's calm everything down.
Yes, exactly.
Let's get everything soothed.
Yeah, more gentle.
Okay. And I guess to understand why they work for these different things, we have to look at the ingredients.
Absolutely.
So in Water's Mist, we see tea tree, lemongrass, and cinnamon oils.
Yeah, tea tree oil is a very popular ingredient in skincare.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about it.
It's really good for a lot of different types of skin problems.
Interesting.
And then lemongrass oil has something called citral in it, which is really good at inhibiting fungal growth.
Okay, so it's telling that fungus to, like, get out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not welcome.
Okay.
And then cinnamon oil, cinnamon is very strong.
Yes, very potent.
It's very potent, so it's effective against fungi,
Okay.
but it can also be a little bit irritating for some people.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind.
That's good to know. Okay, so we've got these two contenders.
Yes.
One sounds very strong, one sounds very soothing. But why is Soothing Juggernaut considered the gold standard for athlete's foot?
So it all comes down to synergy.
Okay.
So remember how we said frankincense helps with penetration?
Right.
So it actually helps that cypress oil get down deep into the skin where that fungus is?
So that it's like working as a team.
Exactly. It's like a 1-2 punch.
Okay.
To knock out that athlete's foot fungus, and then the arnica's coming in to reduce the inflammation and the itch.
So it's giving you relief.
Exact.
But it's also going after the root of the problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about individual ingredients, it's about how they work together.
It's all about the teamwork.
Okay, so what about water's mist then?
Right.
If it's not for these really deep fungal infections like athlete's foot, what is it best for?
Water's mist is going to be your best friend if you have eczema.
Okay,
It's really about calming that inflammation and restoring hydration.
gotcha.
And we'll get into why tea tree and lemongrass oil are good for that in a bit.
Okay, a little teaser, I like it. But before we get too specific with these ingredients and stuff,
Yeah.
let's take a step back and kind of define some of these terms that we're throwing around, like antifungal, anti-inflammatory.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's really helpful for our listeners to really understand what that means,
Definitely.
when they're battling this every day.
For sure. Let's break it down a little bit. So when we say something is antifungal, it means it can help to fight off those fungi
Right.
that cause problems like athlete's foot.
So it's like they're the invaders.
Yeah,
And then the antifungal is like the defense system.
exactly.
Okay.
And anti-inflammatory means that it reduces inflammation,
Okay.
which is really common in skin conditions like eczema and athlete's foot.
Yeah, because you think about athlete's foot, it's not just itchy, it gets all red
Yeah, it gets swollen.
and swollen. Yeah, so there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's your body's response to the problem.
Yeah, so it's kind of fighting a war on two fronts. It's like
Absolutely.
we've got to fight the infection,
Yeah.
but then we also have to calm down
The inflammation.
the inflammation. Yeah, okay, so how do these ingredients actually do that? How do they actually work?
So let's take frankincense, for example.
Okay.
We're talking about how it helps other ingredients penetrate,
Right.
so it gets deeper into the skin.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the key. That unlocks the door for those other powerful ingredients.
So it's like it's carrying them in.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
So then they can actually reach the fungus.
Gotcha. So it's not just about fighting, it's about getting those fighters to the right place.
Exactly. You need to deliver them.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
And then cypress oil, we said, was a really good antifungal.
Right.
It actually disrupts the cell walls of the fungi.
So it's breaking down their defenses.
Yeah, it basically stops it from growing and spreading.
Wow. Okay. So that's cool. So then switching gears to water's mist, we've got tea tree oil.
Yeah.
Which everybody seems to love.
Yeah, tea tree oil is so popular for a reason
Yeah.
because it's both antifungal and antibacterial.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like a double whammy.
So it's like having backup for your backup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really good for eczema because eczema sometimes gets infected.
Okay, right on top of everything
Oh,
else.
it's bacteria on top of it.
Yeah, that's no good. Okay. And then lemongrass oil, we've got citral in that,
Yes.
which you said helps inhibit fungal growth. But what else does that do for eczema?
So lemongrass is really good for soothing.
Okay.
So it really helps to calm that redness and irritation that comes with eczema.
So that's got to be really nice when you're dealing with that itch all the time.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
Okay, so we've been talking about these two salves and kind of the science behind them, but there's also these two other terms that I think are really important to talk about.
Yeah,
Astringent and hygroscopic.
absolutely.
So what does astringent mean?
So an astringent is something that causes the skin to contract,
Okay.
and it has a tightening and drying effect.
Okay.
So have you ever used like a toner
Yeah.
and your face feels really tight afterward?
Oh, yeah.
Like
yeah.
squeaky clean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the astringent.
Cool.
So it can be helpful for like drying out weeping eczema.
Okay.
Or if you have oily skin, it can help reduce that.
So it's like wringing out a wet sponge.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. And then what about hygroscopic?
So hygroscopic is kind of the opposite. So it attracts and holds water.
So it's like the sponge absorbing the water.
Exactly. So
Okay.
it helps draw moisture to the skin and keep it hydrated.
And that'll be good for eczema then?
Yes.
No.
Very helpful for eczema.
Because that tends to be dry skin.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
Astringent is drying.
Yep.
Hygroscopic is hydrating.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how does that all tie back into our two salves?
Okay, so certain ingredients in soothing juggernaut,
Okay,
like cypress oil, have astringent properties.
okay.
So that can be helpful for drying out the moist environment that athlete's foot loves.
So it's not drying out the skin completely, it's just making that environment.
Yeah, it's making it less hospitable.
Yeah, less hospitable for the fungus to live.
Exactly.
Okay,
And then water's mist is more on the hydrating and soothing side.
right,
So tea tree oil, while it does have some astringent properties,
right.
it also has hygroscopic tendencies.
Interesting.
So it can help to balance oil production while still attracting moisture.
So it's like that sweet spot. It's not too dry, not too oily.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
And then lemongrass oil also helps with that balance by calming inflammation
okay.
and soothing the skin.
So it's like a nice little mist that comes in and protects everything.
Yeah, it replenishes the moisture and protects.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've talked about antifungal, anti-inflammatory, astringent, hygroscopic.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
A lot of big words.
Big words.
But I think now it's time to kind of like bring it back to like real life.
Yes.
Like, what does this mean for our listeners?
Absolutely. Let's bring it back to real world experiences.
Okay, so we've talked about all the sciencey stuff, but if I'm like, one of our listeners and I'm working hard all day, my feet are killing me, and I've got that athlete's foot itch, why should I reach for soothing juggernaut?
Okay, so picture this. You've been working all day long. Your feet are tired, they ache, and that athlete's foot itch is starting to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
When you get home, you want relief. So soothing juggernaut is going to be the one you reach for. Because it's got the frankincense, the cypress, the arnica,
Right.
it's going to tackle that problem on multiple levels.
It's like a whole team of specialists
Exactly.
working on your feet.
So you've got the frankincense that's helping that cypress oil penetrate deep into the skin.
Right, to the root of the problem.
Exactly where that fungus is, and then the arnica is going to reduce that inflammation so it's not going to be so red and swollen.
And it's going to stop that itch.
Exactly. It's giving you relief.
Okay, so it's treating the problem
Yes.
and the symptoms.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's why soothing juggernaut for that athlete's foot.
Yes.
But what about water's mist? You said it's good for eczema, but what is it about water's mist that makes it so good for eczema?
So eczema is a little bit different.
Ow.
It's not a fungal infection like athlete's foot.
Right.
It's actually a condition where the skin gets dry and itchy and inflamed.
So it's like your skin is just angry.
Yeah, it's unhappy.
Yeah.
So water's mist is going to soothe that. It's
Excellent.
going to bring in that hydration.
So it's like calming it down.
It's like a peace treaty for your skin.
I like that. Yeah, instead of going to war, we're just going to
We're going to make peace.
make peace.
Okay. So tea tree oil is going to help keep things clean and protected.
Right.
And then lemongrass oil is going to help soothe that irritation and bring back the moisture.
So it's all about finding the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Soothing juggernaut. We're going to fight that athlete's foot.
Yeah,
Water's mist. We're going to calm and soothe that eczema.
absolutely.
Well, this has been so interesting learning about all of this stuff.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And the science behind it all, breaking it down and figuring out what works for these different things. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, hopefully our listeners feel like they're armed with information now
Yes. To make good decisions.
and take care of their skin.
Yeah, because it's important. Our skin is our biggest organ
It is.
and it protects us.
Absolutely, we got to take care of it.
Yes. Well, it's great talking to you about all of this, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into athlete's foot and eczema. We'll see you next time.